Anyone who has spent time on the Navajo reservation has likely heard unsettling stories or experienced eerie events, often involving skinwalkers. I have encountered one myself. Here is my story. I come from a small town in northern Arizona, nestled between the Paiute Reservation to the north and the Navajo Reservation to the south. My high school was very small, with only about 80 students enrolled each year. So we often had to travel south for 5 to 10 hours to play other schools in sports. This meant frequent trips through the Navajo Reservation. Usually we stayed in hotels overnight, but this trip was different. Our basketball coach explained that the school didn't have enough money to cover staying at a hotel, so we would be on the road for about 12 hours straight. That season, I was the only senior boy on the basketball team. After our game, we headed home on our big blue bus. We had been driving for about 2 hours and had entered the reservation when I noticed something unusual. Everyone else was asleep. It was around 2 in the morning, but the bus driver had sped up to 85 miles per hour, which was odd since he never exceeded the speed limit. I couldn't fall asleep like my teammates, so I sat at the back of the bus, staring out at the moonlit desert landscape. Suddenly, I saw a figure running toward the bus at an angle, keeping pace with us at 85 miles per hour. As it got closer, I realized it was humanoid. I remember it had a face painted half black and half white and glowing eyes. Those were like a rabbit's eyes reflecting light. I immediately thought that must be a skinwalker. The skinwalker kept pace with the bus, leaping over sagebrush and rocks. Its eyes were locked on mine. I couldn't look away, as if something was holding my head and eyes in place. It smiled at me with an inhuman grin that stretched from ear to ear, revealing crooked yellow and pointed teeth. This is when I felt nauseous and panicked. The skinwalker then dropped to all fours, its bones cracking and reforming, hair sprouting all over its body. In about 3 seconds, it had transformed into a coyote and ran off into the desert. As soon as it was gone, I rushed to the onboard bathroom and vomited. I didn't tell anyone at first, fearing they would think I was crazy. Eventually, I confided in my Navajo friend, who told me I needed a blessing from the chief. The next school day, I saw the chief in the parking lot. He approached me, muttered something in Navajo while waving a feathered scepter, then turned and drove away. Since then, I haven't seen another skinwalker. It might be because whenever I had to travel south, I'd take a long detour. I heard this story from my dad once. He's always been honest and straightforward, so I believe every word. It was the early 1980s, and my sister, who lived in Montreal, came down to visit our parents for the weekend. She was staying at a friend's house who lent her a car for the visit. After spending some time with our parents, she left around 9 p.m. She had only driven about 7 to 8 miles when the car broke down. Luckily, it happened right in front of a family friend's house. They welcomed her in and let her call Dad, who came to pick her up. The family offered to let her leave the car in their driveway overnight, and my sister decided to stay at our parents' place. By the time they were driving back, it was a little after 10 p.m. and completely dark, as it was late in October. As my sister and Dad drove through a densely wooded area, they suddenly heard an incredibly loud, eerie scream that cut through the sound of the engine, their conversation, and the radio. Dad slammed on the brakes, and they both panicked. Out of nowhere, a 6-foot-tall creature resembling a coyote, walking on 2 legs with a black and white striped tail, appeared on the side of the road and crossed in front of the car. As soon as it passed, the same scream echoed again, only this time much louder. Dad hit the accelerator, and they sped away from there as fast as they could. They never saw it again. One time, I went camping with 2 friends who weren't very familiar with the outdoors. I was introducing them to camping and hiking. I love exploring and not just walking along trails, as I find them monotonous. We ventured a couple of miles from our campsite, but my friends soon wanted to head back. I agreed and showed them the way on my phone, setting a waypoint on the GPS for them to follow. They insisted on taking the pistol I had for safety, leaving me with just some water. I didn't mind and decided to continue exploring on my own. After walking about 5 miles from camp, I found a steep hillside covered in rocks and decided to descend. At the bottom, I followed what appeared to be a dry riverbed. As I moved further south, the terrain grew steeper. Suddenly, I felt an overwhelming sense of unease. I started scanning my surroundings and noticed a large log stretched across the two hillsides. As I crouched down to crawl under it, the sensation of being watched intensified. I glanced to my left and saw nothing. Then I looked around the riverbed before turning to my right. There I saw a massive black canine. It was too small to be a bear, yet it looked like an oversized wolf. We locked eyes for what felt like hours, though it was likely only seconds. The feeling of dread grew with each passing moment. I began to slowly retreat, and as I did, the creature bolted into the forest, moving away from the camp. In hindsight, it moved faster than any animal I had ever seen. Back in the day, my aunt and her friends were known for their wild nights out. They'd pile into an old dilapidated van and head out to the remote areas of the Navajo reservation after dark. It was their routine to drink and have a blast under the stars. One night, as usual, they were out there enjoying themselves when the unexpected happened. Amid their laughter and chatter, they suddenly heard what sounded like stones being thrown at their van. The mood shifted instantly. Everyone fell silent and puzzled by the strange noise. The rock throwing ceased, but then something heavy landed on the van's roof without warning. Panic erupted as they realized something was terribly wrong. They scrambled to lock all the doors. My aunt took charge, jumped into the driver's seat, and tried to start the engine. But as fate would have it, the old van refused to cooperate. The thing on the roof continued its relentless pounding as if it were jumping up and down. In the midst of the chaos, my aunt glimpsed a hand with long, claw-like nails reaching over the edge of the roof and scratching the windshield. Just then, the entity on the roof leaped off. My aunt kept struggling with the engine amid the screams and frantic cries from her friends to get the van moving. Then, as if straight out of a nightmare, she saw a Skinwalker appear beside the driver's side window. Its eyes locked onto her just inches away. That was when my aunt, overwhelmed with fear, dove into the back of the van and began praying fervently. After what felt like an eternity, the Skinwalker finally disappeared. With a deep breath, my aunt climbed back into the driver's seat, managed to get the van started, and sped away from the terrifying encounter. She couldn't describe exactly what they saw that night, but they all agreed it seemed like a dog standing upright. Its arms seemed human, except it was very hairy and had long fingers with long nails. When I was younger, something unsettling happened that I've never quite forgotten. My uncle and I were finishing up gathering firewood for my grandmother as twilight descended. As we drove back on a gravel road at around 30 miles per hour, I felt an eerie sensation that we were being watched. Before I could glance out the window from the passenger seat, my uncle urgently shouted at me, "Don't look outside." I was paralyzed with fear and my heart was pounding fiercely. It felt like it stopped entirely when I heard a series of taps on my window. My uncle accelerated as he was fervently praying in our native language. I was bewildered, thinking the danger had passed until the truck jolted from the rear. My uncle kept repeating that I should look at him and to never look away. Then I heard it again. There were a couple of taps, but this time, these were coming from the window behind me. The anxiety was suffocating and tears welled up in my eyes. After a minute or so, the truck dipped once more. My uncle surveyed the surroundings and sighed in relief. The only sound was the truck and the road. He turned to me and said that we'll ask my father to say a prayer in the morning so that the malevolent presence will forget us. I remember curling up on the seat, focusing on the radio and watching the time tick by. I listened to my uncle as he softly chanted an old prayer until we reached my grandmother's house. Years later, I had a nightmare about that incident. I called my uncle and we reminisced about the event. He told me that he didn't exactly see faces on the truck window. What he saw was only eyes watching me, glowing like brake lights on the road. I tried to lighten the mood with a joke and asked him why didn't he just brake when the thing was in the back. He didn't laugh. He just paused before he replied, "Because it wasn't alone." This was when I used to visit my cousin's place in South Dakota. If you look the place up on Google Maps, you'll see it's a vast open plain. It's not unusual for people to report sightings of spirits there, and I remember having a few unsettling experiences myself. To reach my cousin's house, you'd have to drive 20 minutes from the main road. Her cabin was near a dense forest, making it very secluded, with the nearest neighbor about 10 minutes away by car and 30 minutes on foot. There were no streetlights, and if you needed to use the bathroom, you had to walk to the outhouse. It's about a 3-minute trek from the house. At night, a flashlight was essential because it was pitch black. One night, my cousin, her mom, and I stayed in the cabin that they let us use. We had come to the res to deliver some documents to the tribal office, so my cousin and I decided to make a trip of it. Late at night, as we watched TV, we heard scratching noises at the windows in the back room. We panicked because the door to that room was open and the blinds were up. We ran to close the blinds without looking outside, figuring it might be a spirit. Her mom was asleep, so we made sure to lock the doors and tried to ignore the noises all night. We waited until dawn to use the bathroom, and even then, we went together and kept the radio on from our phones to stay calm. The next morning, I remember her mom making coffee while we talked in the living room when one of the plates suddenly fell. Then, my cousin noticed that the car doors were open even though we remembered locking them. Nothing seemed too alarming until her mom discovered our tires were slashed. Also, the windows appeared to have some kind of claw marks on them. When we told her mom about our experience the night before, she said it was likely a spirit, but assured us that she had placed protective herbs around the doorways before nightfall. That was what kept it from entering the house. She essentially safeguarded the house with a quick protection prayer. It was a frightening experience, and spirits are not to be taken lightly. I've had my share of encounters and have heard many stories from my parents about their experiences. Please, if you visit reservations at night, never go alone or leave your belongings outside. They can be taken and used to cast a curse on you. According to the locals, it could be fatal if you don't see a medicine man. Many years ago, when I was 21, I worked as a camp counselor at a remote summer camp nestled in the woods of Fishkill. The camp consisted of several cabins spread out on a mountain, each one about a half-mile from the next, creating a sense of isolation. One night around 1 a.m., I was sneaking out to meet my camp girlfriend, which was against the rules since we were supposed to stay in our cabins after 10 p.m. I was making my way through the woods to get to her cabin when I heard rustling nearby. Expecting it to be a bear or another animal, I paused to investigate. To my surprise, a 3-foot-tall humanoid figure emerged from the bushes. It was too dark to see any distinct features, but it stood on 2 legs and had 2 arms, resembling a miniature person. Its entire body appeared solid black, without any noticeable clothing or other details. Intrigued, I began to approach the figure, but it bolted back into the woods. The way it moved was astonishingly mechanical, like someone performing the robot dance as its body seemed to shift 90 degrees before it sprinted away. I had never seen anything run that fast on 2 legs. Despite being a fit and fast runner myself, I couldn't hope to match its speed. To this day, I can't explain what I saw. It looked human but was too short to be a person. I also can't imagine a human running that fast. The memory of that night has always puzzled me, and I often think about returning to the camp to try and find that mysterious creature again. Please drop a like and subscribe to the channel for more horror stories.